I'm 34 weeks, 8 months, pregnant. Since finding out about my baby back in October, my mother has hijacked and pressured me every step of the way. When we found out, my husband and I wanted to wait until we were 12 weeks to announce. I had the cutest Christmas announcement planned and was super excited. Well, she blabbed to a couple of people and threatened to spill to more, so to beat her to the punch, we announced at roughly 7 weeks. Turn around and my husband and I decided to have an intimate gender reveal and record our reaction to send to family first, before posting to make it fair, since his family lives a few hours away. The whole day she kept trying to get us to just tell her. She also was super insistent that baby was a boy since she never had a boy. She's a girl, by the way. We posted the video and she called her side of the family telling them before they could see the video from us. Most recently, I'm talking last night, she made a comment on a schoolmate of mine's maternity photos, revealing the name we picked publicly. We've only told close family and our doctors thus far. There are so many small things in between, like buying as many baby clothes as possible. Even after her dad and I told her to stop, since we haven't even shopped yet. Making little comments comparing my daughter in pregnancy to her, including mentioning her traumatic birth at least once a week. I'm getting so exhausted setting boundaries and explaining to this grown woman why what she did is wrong. I know that she's excited, but so am I. Just once I want to make an announcement myself and on my time. How can I make her understand? Is it even worth trying anymore? To add, thank you everyone for being so blunt. I had her on an information diet for a few months. We talked and for a while things changed. And I really thought this time would be different. It wasn't, you're all correct, and I relaxed my boundaries. This is something that I will work on. My mother's going back on an information diet. I will restate our boundaries about the birth and bringing baby home. I will make sure my husband is with me and that we make it clear that we are holding firm this time. She already is aware that my husband is the only person allowed in the room and that baby girl's arrival is going to be our news. This is something that she has agreed to, but I'll make sure to let her know that there will be consequences, including limiting access to baby as much as possible. I regret letting myself be walked over to this point and realize how much I just reinforced that if she pushes, I'll crumble. Almost forgot, I live with my mother. I've partially explained the situation in a comment, but it's not as simple as just moving out. It takes time and money. 2 things we are working on. I also can't kick her out. This is her house. I still have to be respectful, since she's been kind enough to let us stay. For the time being, the best I can do is put her back on the information diet and install the lock my husband is picking up when we get paid. Once again, I will reiterate that she will have as limited contact with my daughter as she can possibly have if she continues to disregard my boundaries and requests. She also will not be in the delivery room. My husband and hospital staff will know this. It has already been agreed on. She also knows that we are to be the first ones to announce that she's been born. Yes, there will be consequences for breaking that agreement. I have learned my lesson. Now for an update. Putting this up top since no one seems to read the ones at the bottom. I've had a long conversation with my mother about boundaries and the consequences of breaking them. For once, it was surprisingly productive and I got my point across. I realized that I should have held more firm. I relaxed my boundaries because she did what she has my whole life and changed for a while after facing consequences and then reverted back to old ways. From now on, she is back on the information diet and knows what consequences are in store if she pushes boundaries again. Now, as for the people attacking and judging me for my financial situation from a Reddit post, I truly hope you all continue to have the luxury of not knowing what it's like to have to choose between losing a home or rooming with someone who pushes boundaries. Yes, one financial crisis landed us here, but we have worked our asses off since we moved in and found out we were pregnant to get ourselves in a stable position. Both the move and pregnancy happened within a week of each other. We had no clue we were pregnant until we got here. We are contractually obligated to stay in the area for my husband's job until around October. After that, we plan on being on our own again. We have the choice right now of being out on our own and barely floating or staying at my mom's. and setting our family up so that we never have to go through this again. We have carefully planned the next year to get us in a position where we don't have to worry financially. You can't see from a Reddit post or even my comments how hard we have busted our asses to give our family a good life. Once again, choosing to keep our daughter was an incredibly hard conversation. We went over every choice we could make: termination, adoption, foster, keeping her, everything. We were fully prepared to not be parents, but we came up with a plan to make it work. We have a stable, steady income and my inheritance to support us. However, the legal process of dealing with inheritance without a will takes money. Moving out takes money. Everything takes money. So even though we could move out, it's smarter for us and our daughter to stay here for a little longer. If the first year of her life is rough so that the rest of it is worry-free, that's worth it to me. We are more than capable of providing for her. We made sure of that. I'll take having my boundaries stomped on and being forced to grow a spine if it means that my daughter will have a good life. I'm done replying and arguing with people who will never understand just how hard we're working for this little girl. This post was about my mother disrespecting my boundaries, not whether or not we should have our daughter. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Sounds like you have put up boundaries, but are not enforcing them with consequences. Have you been very specific with her on the things she can help with and the things she needs to stop doing? Explaining that this is your pregnancy and you need to experience it without her constant interventions? If so, then you need to limit contact until she starts to understand that you will no longer tolerate it. If it's this bad with the pregnancy, it will be 10 times once the baby gets here. You need to draw the line now. Comment 2. You are 22 years old. It took one single financial emergency, and you and your husband had to move in with your mother. You could not afford a baby unaliving, so you chose to bring this child into this situation? You and your husband need to research your state's resources and move out ASAP. I'm a little bit concerned because you could have gotten a baby unaliving for free. There are organizations that send you pills to your home. Make sure you two have a plan for when you're allowed to have intimacy after the birth. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So, a lot has happened in the past month. My mother seemed to take our last conversation to heart, and for a few weeks, things were actually calm. She respected our boundaries, didn't pry too much, and even started asking before buying anything for the baby. It felt like a small victory, and I was cautiously optimistic. But then, things took a turn. About 2 weeks ago, my husband and I had a small baby shower with just a few close friends and family. We made it clear to my mother that this was our event to host and that we wanted to handle everything ourselves. She agreed, but on the day of the shower, she showed up with a huge cake and decorations that completely clashed with what we had planned. It was frustrating, but we let it slide because we didn't want to cause a scene. Then, last week, I made a mistake that changed everything. I was talking to my mother about our plans for the birth, and I mentioned that we were considering having a doula. I didn't think much of it at the time, but she latched onto the idea and started insisting that she should be the one to support me during labor instead. I tried to explain that we had already made our decision, but she wouldn't listen. She even went as far as to call the hospital to see if she could get special permission to be in the delivery room. When I found out, I was livid. I confronted her and she acted like she had done nothing wrong. She said she was just trying to help and that I was being ungrateful. It was the last straw for me. I told her that if she couldn't respect our wishes, she wouldn't be involved in the birth at all. She stormed off, and we haven't spoken much since. The fallout from this has been tough. My husband and I have been trying to focus on preparing for the baby, but the tension with my mother is always there. She's been giving us the silent treatment, which is both a relief and a source of stress. I know she's hurt, but I can't keep letting her bulldoze over our decisions. In the midst of all this, I found out that my mother had been talking to my husband's family behind our backs. She had been sharing details about our plans and even tried to convince them to side with her on the doula issue. When my husband confronted his family, they were just as shocked as we were. They assured us that they supported our decisions and wouldn't let my mother interfere. This whole situation has brought up a lot of old wounds for me. Growing up, my mother was always overbearing and controlling. She would make decisions for me without asking and would get upset if I tried to assert my independence. I thought I had moved past all of that, but this pregnancy has brought it all back to the surface. It's been a painful reminder of how much I still need to work on setting boundaries and standing up for myself. One thing that has become clear is that my mother has a deep need for control. I think a lot of it stems from her own experiences. She had a difficult childhood and was always trying to prove herself. When she had me, she saw it as a chance to create the perfect family she never had. But her need for control often overshadowed her love. It made it hard for me to feel like I had any autonomy. My husband has been my rock through all of this. He's been patient and understanding, even when I've been at my wit's end. We've had a lot of late-night talks about our own childhoods and how we want to raise our daughter differently. It's been a bonding experience for us, even though it's been challenging. As we get closer to the due date, and I've been trying to focus on the positive, we've set up the nursery, and it's finally starting to feel real. My husband and I have been taking childbirth classes and practicing different techniques to help with labor. It's been empowering to take control of our own experience and make decisions that feel right for us. But there's still a part of me that worries about what will happen when the baby arrives. I know my mother will want to be involved, and I'm not sure how to navigate that without causing more conflict. I've been talking to a therapist about it, and she's been helping me come up with strategies to set boundaries in a way that feels firm but compassionate. One thing I've learned is that I can't change my mother. I can only change how I respond to her. It's been a hard lesson, but I think it's one that will make me a better parent in the long run. I want my daughter to grow up feeling loved and supported, but also knowing that she has the right to make her own choices, so that's where things stand right now. It's been pretty up and down, but I'm hopeful that we're moving in the right direction. Thanks for reading and for all the support. Am I the idiot for finally walking away from my husband's never-ending tantrums? An emotional roller coaster. My husband, 50-year-old male, and I, 48-year-old female, have been together for 15 years. He has had temper tantrums since the beginning of our relationship. 3 months after our wedding, I told him to go see a therapist, or we would split up. He did so. But after that, he still would drive fast when he would be upset with me in the car, and it was terrifying. I spoke to him about it one evening, and after that, he never did so again. But he still suffered from depression and mood swings. I tried to be there for him, but he didn't want to talk about things, and I had no idea what to do anymore for him. I Googled and looked for info, and in the end, I tried to give him space, and I would do things by myself. I felt very lonely because this meant that he wouldn't be there for me either. But the bad moods and the threat of the tantrums remained. I felt I walked on eggshells all the time. I stopped inviting him to join me at events, also to work events, even when I received an award. He also skipped my birthday parties because I was afraid of a scene afterwards. I just didn't feel at ease when he was around because I felt I had to manage his mood. It was easier without him. I have to admit that while he didn't feel emotionally secure, he did offer financial security, which I always appreciated. He earns a lot and I am freelance and don't always have jobs. And when I do, I earn at least 3 times less than him. I don't have access to a common account though. He transfers money to my account once a month. It very much feels like he has the money and I have none. And because I work less, I feel I am not entitled to his money. We don't have kids, so it still feels like his money and mine. So we have savings, but I don't have access to them. Last year, I was working on a very stressful project, and it all got too much. I felt so alone. He also had an injury where he was in pain, and he got so upset and yelled that he wanted a divorce and hadn't been happy in years. So we talked and agreed that he would move out for 6 months. He has now moved back in because the lease was up on the other place, and we wanted to see if it would work out after a calming down period. Last week we went out with friends, the first time in months. Going back home it was late, and usually we take the tram home, but we missed the last one. We walked to a taxi stand, and his injury was bothering him and he was in pain. At the taxi stand, the drivers told us the price was double than usual, which often happens on a weekend night. And my husband got really upset and yelled at them that this was not normal, and moving toward the driver like he wanted a fight. I understand he was tired, frustrated, and in pain, but he is an adult. I literally had to shove him to the other side of the street to solve the situation. He then insisted on taking the night bus, so we waited for 20 minutes, and then it was another 45 minutes to get home. On the bus, I was on edge, hoping nothing else happened to set him off. He once hit the seat in front of him, and then apologized to the person sitting in front of us. When he moved back in, I told him that it was on the condition that he would be able to manage his emotions, that I would no longer feel responsible to do it for him. This to me is proof that nothing really has changed. This relationship takes so much of my energy and time, trying to figure it out, thinking it through how to get it right, and I never get it right. We talked today, and he said he felt very hurt that I always have so much empathy for others, but none for him, and that I didn't even take his side, but just judged him for losing control. And that is what I did. But I don't feel sorry. He didn't apologize. He didn't say anything about scaring me, putting me in a difficult position by starting a quarrel. He said that he has always given me everything, and he has been lovely and generous. But that doesn't excuse or eradicate this event. At this moment, I am done with this relationship. I have tried, I have waited, but it seems the patterns don't change, just the way in which he acts out. First cars, then hitting things in the house, slamming doors, now this. I'm afraid about the financial insecurity when separating, but I do want to be in a place where I feel safe. Am I exaggerating? Should I see his side of things? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Apples and oranges. But I'll just say this. My grandmother divorced my grandfather when they were in their mid-60s after he cheated on her. She was visibly much happier without him. I never got to ask, but I think he must have been quite the burden to carry around. It seems like you can see the price you pay for being married to your husband. You have to decide if it's worth it to keep paying it. No one can decide for you if the life you've led is worth staying for, or if you have the strength to stay. Though you could secretly look into a divorce lawyer, just to see what your rights would be. Look into your finances and plan accordingly. Just in case, you know. Comment 2. What you're describing is abuse. It's not temper tantrums. It's not bad moods. It's not mood swings. It's abuse. He is harassing you and other people. You are not exaggerating. It's taken you far too long to wake up. You need to read this book to understand your current situation and how it will never get better. The only solution is to leave. Now, for the update. Thank you for reading my last post. 2 weeks ago, after the incident with the taxi driver, I decided to take a step back and really evaluate my situation. I needed to figure out if I was being fair to myself by staying in this relationship. I spent a lot of time thinking about the past and how things have been between us. I realized that I had been making excuses for his behavior for far too long. I decided to have a serious conversation with him about our future. We sat down one evening after dinner, and I told him that I couldn't continue living like this. I explained that his outbursts and inability to control his emotions were taking a toll on me. He seemed to listen, but I could tell he was getting defensive. He started to bring up all the things he had done for me, like providing financial security and being there for me when I needed him. But I told him that those things didn't make up for the emotional turmoil he was putting me through. He got angry and stormed out of the house. I didn't hear from him for the rest of the night. The next morning, he came back and apologized for leaving, but he didn't apologize for his behavior. Instead, he said that he felt like I was attacking him and that he didn't know how to handle it. I told him that I wasn't attacking him, but I needed him to understand how his actions were affecting me. A few days later, we had another argument. This time, it was about money. He had transferred less money to my account than usual, and when I asked him about it, he said that he was trying to save more for our future. I told him that I understood the need to save, but I also needed to be able to pay my bills and take care of myself. He accused me of being ungrateful and said that I didn't appreciate everything he did for me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how our relationship had gotten to this point. I remembered the early days when we were so in love and couldn't imagine being without each other. But now, it felt like we were just going through the motions. I realized that I had been holding on to the hope that things would get better, but they never did. The next day, I decided to talk to a lawyer about my options. I needed to know what my rights were and how I could protect myself financially if we decided to separate. The lawyer was very understanding and gave me a lot of useful information. She told me that I had a right to a fair share of our assets and that I shouldn't be afraid to stand up for myself. I also reached out to a therapist to help me sort through my feelings. The therapist helped me see that I'd been putting my husband's needs above my own for far too long. She encouraged me to think about what I wanted for my future and to start making decisions that were in my best interest. One evening, while I was sitting in the living room, my husband came in and sat down next to me. He looked tired and defeated. He told me that he had been thinking a lot about our conversations and that he realized he needed to make some changes. He said that he wanted to start going to therapy again and that he was willing to do whatever it took to make our relationship work. I was skeptical, but I agreed to give him another chance. I told him that I needed to see real changes in his behavior and that I couldn't keep living in fear of his outbursts. He promised that he would work on it and that he would do everything he could to make things better. Over the next week, I noticed some small changes in his behavior. He was more patient and seemed to be making an effort to control his emotions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was too little, too late. I had been through so much, and I wasn't sure if I could ever fully trust him again. One night, we were sitting on the couch watching TV when he suddenly turned to me and said, "I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry. I don't want to lose you." It was the first time he had ever really acknowledged the pain he had caused me. I felt a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a glimmer of hope. But then, just a few days later, he had another outburst. This time, it was over something small. I had forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning. He yelled at me and slammed the door as he left the house. I realized then that no matter how much he promised to change, the patterns were still there. I decided that I needed to take a break from the relationship. I told him that I was going to stay with a friend for a while, to clear my head and figure out what I wanted to do. He was upset, but he didn't try to stop me. I packed a bag and left that evening. Staying with my friend has given me some much-needed space to think. I've been talking to my therapist and trying to figure out what my next steps should be. I know that I deserve to be in a relationship where I feel safe and valued, and I'm not sure if that's possible with my husband. I've also been thinking a lot about my own needs and desires. I've realized that I've been putting my own happiness on hold for too long. I want to start focusing on myself and what makes me happy. I've started looking for more freelance work and thinking about ways to become more financially independent. As I sit here writing this, I still don't have all the answers. But I know that I'm on the right path. I'm taking things one day at a time and trying to make decisions that are in my best interest. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for leaving my husband after he called me white trash at karaoke? This occurred last Friday night while we were out at a bar with some friends. It's a karaoke bar, and I had been on stage singing a country song while the rest of the group was still at the table. Apparently, there was a moment during the song when my husband had said, "My wife has the most country essence out of all the women here tonight." And when asked if he meant I grew up on a farm, he replied with, "No, she grew up in a pretty white trash area, not that she's white trash." He informed me of this tonight while we were discussing a country song I had sung at the bar several months ago, and he realized when I had begun crying that he had royally messed up. This isn't the first time he's casually joked about me to his work friends, and then told me after the fact as if it wouldn't be something to be upset over. The last time he did it, he had made a joke at work and used me as a scapegoat for making it, saying, "Well, you know, guys, my wife is part Native American, so it's okay if I say this." One of his friends then replied and said, "Your wife is literally whiter than you," to which all the guys in his shop laughed, including him. I've only recently discovered this part of my family in the past year since my dad died last June, and all the family that has a connection to me being Native American is dead. My grandma, great-grandma, my dad, and my great-aunt have all passed. My uncle, my dad's brother, isn't reliable, and one of the main reasons I had to flee my home state. So I have no connection to any family that could have given me more answers about my heritage, what tribe we're part of, anything. And he made fun of me with his coworkers shortly after I told him when it wasn't something I was openly sharing with people. After I started crying, he apologized and said he didn't mean it as an insult, and I clarified, "I didn't think you were white trash." He went on to say that in his family, they didn't view white trash as an insult, and all proudly claimed to be rednecks, hillbillies, etc. The issue is, He grew up middle class, I'd argue upper middle class, and did not grow up in poverty. So he's never been called any of these names in a true rude and derogatory manner. I have. My family was on food stamps and welfare my entire life. My sister and I rarely got new clothes, shoes, hygiene products, etc. My sister didn't have a bed after she got too big for her toddler bed because my parents could never afford one. So yeah, the white trash comment hurt a lot because to other people, I am white trash. I had no prospects, barely went to college, nearly went bankrupt after I got kicked out and lost my car. When I explained this to him, it just seemed to go in one ear and out the other. I told him at point blank that he knew it was an insult to say I grew up in a white trash area because he made a point of clarifying to his friends that I wasn't white trash. He knew it was insulting, he knew it was hurtful, which is why he didn't mention it until now, a week later. But I'm mortified that he said this to all his buddies because we still hung out with them for several more hours that night, and I'm sure they all look down on me now. I'm just terribly hurt by this and know it'll take some time to truly move on. But when you've been called something by people your whole life, it's not easy. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. We can all make mistakes and say insensitive things sometimes, especially when our brains are still developing as under 25-year-olds are. It happens. What's wrong here, though, is that he hasn't acknowledged that he was wrong or tried to make amends. He's basically just shrugged his shoulders and said, well, it wasn't an insult to you. In other words, he's demonstrating an unwillingness to learn from his mistakes and a lack of empathy for your experience. In a normal relationship, when someone says, hey, that thing you said earlier hurt my feelings, the spouse would respond, OMG, really? I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that word hurt you. I won't do it again. Because when someone we love is hurting, we want to prevent it from happening again. His reaction says a lot about how much he cares about you. It's sad. Comment 2. There's trash in this relationship, but it's not you. He sounds disgusting. I hope you find someone better. Hell, being absolutely alone would be 1,000,000 times better than life with this ass clown. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So, after that night at the bar, things have been pretty tense between us. I tried to brush it off and move on, but it's been eating at me. We had a big argument the next day. I told him how much his comments hurt me, and he apologized again, but it felt hollow. He said he didn't mean to hurt me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he just didn't get it. I mean, how could he? He's never lived through what I have. On Sunday, we went to a barbecue at one of his coworkers' houses. I was dreading it, but I didn't want to cause more drama by refusing to go. When we got there, I could feel the tension. His friends were polite, but I could tell they were looking at me differently. It was like they were trying to see the white trash he had joked about. I felt so out of place. I tried to make small talk, but it was awkward. I ended up spending most of the time in the kitchen, helping out with the food just to avoid the stares. Later that evening, one of his friends, Mark, pulled me aside. He apologized for the comments and said he didn't realize how much it would hurt me. He said he thought it was just a joke and didn't mean anything by it. I appreciated the apology, but it didn't change how I felt. It just made me realize that my husband had shared something so personal and painful with people who didn't understand or respect it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how he had betrayed my trust. I started questioning everything. If he could say those things about me to his friends, what else was he saying behind my back? I felt so alone. I didn't know who to talk to or who I could trust. On Monday, I decided to take a risk. I called my uncle. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I needed answers about my heritage. I needed to feel connected to something, to someone. When he picked up, I was surprised by how happy he was to hear from me. We talked for hours. He told me stories about my dad and my grandparents. He didn't have all the answers, but he gave me a sense of belonging that I had been missing. But here's where things took a turn. My husband found out I had called my uncle. He was furious. He said I was digging up the past and causing more problems. He accused me of trying to find reasons to be upset with him. We had a huge fight. I told him I needed to understand my heritage and that it had nothing to do with him. He didn't get it. He said I was being dramatic and that I needed to let it go. I realized then that he would never understand. He would never get what it's like to feel disconnected from your own history. He would never understand the pain of being called names and made fun of for something you can't change. I felt so defeated. The next day, I decided to stay with a friend for a while. I needed space to think. I needed to figure out what I wanted and what I needed. My friend was supportive and understanding. She listened to me vent and cry. She didn't judge me or tell me I was overreacting. She just let me be. While I was there, I started thinking about my relationship with my husband. I thought about all the times he had made jokes at my expense, all the times he had dismissed my feelings. I realized that this wasn't just about the comments he made at the bar. It was about a pattern of behavior that I had been ignoring for too long. I remembered a time early in our relationship when he had made a joke about my weight. I had laughed it off, but it had hurt. I had told myself it was just a joke, that he didn't mean it. But now I saw it for what it was. It was a sign that he didn't respect me or my feelings. I thought about all the times he had made decisions without consulting me, all the times he had dismissed my opinions. I realized that I had been compromising too much, that I had been putting his needs and feelings above my own. I had been trying so hard to make him happy that I had forgotten about my own happiness. I knew I had to make a change. I couldn't keep living like this. I needed to take control of my life and my happiness. I needed to stand up for myself and demand the respect I deserved. So I made a decision. I told my husband that I needed a break. I needed time to figure things out. He was angry and hurt, but I didn't care. I needed to do this for me. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll be able to work things out or if this is the end of our marriage. But I do know that I need to take care of myself. I need to find my own happiness and my own sense of belonging. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.